So now we'll move into the tips for round 22. First game, massive game, Collingwood versus Geelong at the MCG. Collingwood have had a bit of a slump in the last few weeks, obviously losing against Carlton and then a really big upset against Hawthorn. Geelong coming off a good win against Port Adelaide, but maybe it could have been a little bit more, and a loss against Fremantle. So both teams aren't coming in with the best of form. I just think that Collingwood, with their class, I don't think they lose 3 in a row. And I think that they bounce back here, surely, against Geelong.
No, I don't think they do. I think the Cats win.
You think the Cats win?
Yeah, I think this Dacos and Nathan Murphy injuries really going to hurt the structure of the Collingwood. And I think it's going to be sort of like the Brisbane when they lost Ashcroft. It's going to be their fun. They're going to just trying to find I don't think they're going to midfielder. Yeah, they're just going to have to try and find a way, and I just don't think they're going to be able to do it straight off the bat.
Yeah, I think that Billy Frampton obviously comes back for the Pies. I think that's a pretty obvious one.
Yeah,
he takes that spot in the back 50. I just think that the Cats don't have enough. They're not playing well enough. I don't think that. I think that they need to win at least 2 of their last 3 games, but I don't know if they're playing well enough to beat Collingwood, and I think Collingwood have to bounce back after their 2 poor performances in the past 2 weeks. That's why I've picked them. After that, into Saturday afternoon, it's North Melbourne versus the Bombers, and after the Bombers' performance last week, this isn't exactly a gimme for them.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for Kyle Langford, I don't know where the Bombers would be in the past few weeks. He arguably got them almost over the line against the Swans, and he just got them over the line against the Eagles. I mean, I think you have to tip the Bombers here, but even though North Melbourne looked a little bit better against Melbourne, I don't think they are. I mean, it's funny because obviously West Coast are one of the worst performing teams in the past 20 odd years, and they almost took North Melbourne's 17th spot. I mean, that would be embarrassing if North Melbourne finished bottom from here.
Yeah, it would be embarrassing, but I think Essendon do win. They will respond because they were just horrible against West Coast, and Langford just he did.
It surprises me that he's not being talked about a lot more as an All-Australian forward pocket, because I think that it's unfortunate because Toby Green and him are probably fighting out for that one spot. I don't know if they can have him and Langford in that All-Australian lineup. I just don't know if that would work. And I think they've got to fit a couple of the midfielders in those spots.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it's going to be a bit difficult for fitting them both. But I think Kyle Langford's had a brilliant year nonetheless, and he definitely gets in the squad.
Yeah, he'll get in the 40,
Yeah. So after that, we get to Sydney versus the Gold Coast Suns at the SCG. This is kind of Sydney's bogey side.
Yeah.
They obviously beat them early in the season, but before that, they've had a really poor run against the Gold Coast. The Suns have actually been able to beat them quite regularly, really. And maybe that is because of Stuart Dew. Obviously, he's not there anymore. So I will be interested to see how this one goes for the Suns, if they're going to play out the rest of this season, because their final hopes are gone now with their loss to the Crows. I am going to pick Sydney. They are in very good form. I don't know if the Swans make it from finals from here, though, because I think it's just a little bit too far. I think those close losses that they had earlier in the season probably going to come back to haunt them. Yeah. And I think definitely that draw against the Cats is probably their biggest downfall for them. But I think they will win this one against the Gold Coast.
Yeah, I think the Swans do win. They're playing better footy at the moment, and
they've finally got all their players back.
Yeah, they've finally got their players back. They just look better at the moment. So, and the Gold Coast, if they can't do it in the midfield, they can't do it. So
yeah, I think that's fair enough. Cool. After that, we get to Brisbane versus the Crows at the Gabba. I think this is what, if this was in Adelaide, you give the Crows a huge chance here, but because it's at the Gabba, I think it's a pretty routine win for the Lions.
Yeah.
They need to start, bouncing back a little bit. The last few weeks have been pretty poor. And it's very interesting that the top 4 have performed quite poorly in the past month.
Yeah.
Not even the month, but the last 2 to 3 weeks. Port Adelaide have fallen off. Melbourne aren't playing that well. Brisbane have lost a couple of games. They've lost a few games there. They lost to the Gold Coast. They only just beat Fremantle. And then Collingwood have lost their last 2. I don't know if we've ever seen a top 4 in the past, 5-10 years that have just stopped performing.
Yeah,
and
they've struggled.
They've struggled. They're lucky they had a very good start to the season, because there's teams hunting them in the bottom 4. But I do think Brisbane will beat the Crows pretty convincingly here. Yeah,
I think the Brisbane, at the Gabba, they've always got it's the fortress there up in Brisbane, so they should win. And it's one of the 4 teams normally gets on a run.
Yeah.
When they get into the finals, I think last year Geelong went on an 15 game run, and didn't
Well,
win.
you saw them in Sydney both had a great run towards the grand
Yeah,
final, and they were the
exactly.
ones who got there. And you saw Melbourne, who had poor form, couldn't get there in the end.
Yeah,
They
so-
went out in straight sets. So
Yeah.
you have to hit the finals at full pace, and I think Brisbane are a team that can do that.
Yeah.
So if they can get the home finals, I think they're going to be very hard to beat down at the Gabba. Although in saying that, when they've had home finals in the past few finals series, they haven't been able to produce on the main stage.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to somehow, when they make the finals, but I do think they will beat the Crows pretty convincingly there. After that, we get to probably the game of the round at the MCG, Carlton versus the Demons. Massive game for both teams. Carlton coming to this game red hot. Melbourne did come off a win against North Melbourne, but pretty sluggish performance, and obviously the massive loss of Harrison Petty, who I think if they finally found the forward that could bring them forward into the rest of this season, and then he gets injured.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I think this is going to be a tough game. I'm actually going to pick a bit of a roughie here. I'm going to be picking Carlton over the Demons. I just think they're in too good a form, the Blues, and who would have said that 7 or 8 weeks ago? This team bouncing back and potentially, I don't know if they'll make the 4. I think they're going to have to... I mean, they're 10 points off it, so they'd have to win every single game, and one of the teams would have to lose every single game, so it's pretty unlikely, but Carlton are doing everything they can right now to, give us their stakes towards a... I don't know about a premiership. I think it's a little bit too far for them. I don't know if they can win all 4 finals, but, I mean, they're probably the best team in the comp at the moment, like, in form-wise.
Yeah, Carlton fans, you're making finals, and you're going to win this week, I think. You seem to find the structure at the moment that you know how to play. You're playing under the Voss way.
Well, the thing is as well that they're finding... they beat St Kilda, but they didn't have Charlie Curnow dominating too well.
Exactly. He kicked 1 goal and it
was late in the last quarter.
Late in the game.
So.
You don't have Mackay. You had Chera, Walsh out, so they're finding a way to do it, and if they can get some of those players back in the next couple of weeks, Carlton might be scary in the finals.
Yeah. I said in the review part that I think this could be the first time in a long time that I've actually thought the team outside of the top 4 could go all the way, because all the teams in the top 4 right now are not playing their best footy. And if you don't hit the finals with form, it's very hard to just start it up during the finals.
Yeah.
A lot of I don't know, since probably the Bulldogs, since any team has gone from the finals and hit and went into the going into the finals limping through and then being able to convert on the main stage. We've seen in 2017 Richmond hit the finals with a massive run. The Eagles did as well in 2018. In 2019 the Tigers did it again, and in 2020 they did as well. Actually, no, maybe not so much in 2020, so maybe that's the last time. But teams, if they hit the finals with pace, they can actually really go all the way.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's going to be big, and I think Carlton are definitely probably the best form team in the comp at the moment. But after that, though, we get to West Coast versus Fremantle, probably one of the least broadcast derbies in a very long time. I don't think anyone really cares about this game anymore, to be honest. It's very poor how both the WA teams have done this year.
Yeah, it is. It's 100% it is.
I'm very surprised that West Coast have actually got some pretty good odds here. But, I mean, they have been pretty okay in the past few weeks, but I don't think it matters here. I think Freo win this one pretty convincingly, and they need to, really, just to save some face. If they lose to their crosstown rivals who have been pathetic for a majority of the season, I think that's a pretty poor performance. So, surely they go in and win this one.
Yeah, Freo should win. I think they had their run, the West Coast Eagles, the last 2 weeks. It just seems like that was their run and that's it.
Yeah, surely they peter out now, and I think the Freo get a pretty good win here. It is interesting to see how Luke Jackson's playing as well. I think he's done very well in the past few weeks, and I think he is their ruckman going in the future. So we've already talked about that in a future trade video, but yeah, Sean Darcy, I don't know if he makes that squad, if he's in that team next year. He's such a good player, and I think he
deserves a number 1 ruck role.
Yeah. After that, we get to Sunday, down in Tassie. This is Hawthorn versus the Bulldogs. Bulldogs had a massive win last week against the Tigers, responding well, and Hawthorn, one of the biggest upsets of the season, going up against Collingwood and winning that. If this was at Marvel Stadium, I'd be picking the Bulldogs every day of the week, but because it's in Tassie, I am picking Hawthorn. I can see that you've tipped Hawthorn as well.
Yeah.
For us saying that we were picking some roughies this week, I think we've tipped them all the same anyway. But I just think Hawthorn... I did say this last week, that the Bulldogs are very much a response team.
They were
a big response team, like Port Adelaide have been in the past as well. The Bulldogs are one of the biggest response teams in the AFL. They love to bounce back after being put against the wall. But once they are the foot on the throat comes off a little bit, they tend to lag behind.
Yeah.
And if they don't bring their best against Hawthorn down in Tassie, who are pretty good, I mean, they're very good down there. It's almost a fortress for them even this season.
Yeah.
They almost beat the Crows down there this season. So, as well as winning a couple of other games down there. So, I'm picking Hawthorn, and I think that the Bulldogs, this is the game they have to win. If they don't win this one, then they're right back in the race. If they win this one, then they'll make the finals because they've got West Coast the week after.
Yeah, I think I've tipped Hawthorn, obviously, like you're saying. I've done it because of one huge reason. Bontempelli will get tagged, and McGuinness will go to him, and I just think if it's Liberatore and Bontempelli, I think if both of them don't fire, Western Bulldogs struggle.
Yeah.
They have struggled all season when both of them don't fire. So I think that's going to be a huge contest. And also Sicily's in career best form.
Yeah, he's been massive. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be massive. That I think he probably makes the All-Australian team from being in the team, making a defensive lineup from 16th position. But, I mean, he's done everything he can to make that spot.
Yeah. And
I don't think he misses it. And I think that when he plays in the team for Hawthorn, other than probably in round 1 against the Swans, when he played, all the games that he's been in this season, they've actually performed really well, the Hawks.
Yeah.
So, I think it'll be interesting how they go from here. James Sicily in career best form. I think the Hawks can win this one, but I will be interested to see if the Bulldogs do continue, because I think they have to. If they don't win this one, I don't think they win in round 24.
Yeah.
So, they have to win this game. They should win it on paper, but down in Tassie, I think the Hawks have a real chance here to knock off a big team. After that, we get to Sunday afternoon, which is St Kilda versus Richmond. Massive game again. Tigers have really dropped off in their form the past few weeks, and the Saints have been free-falling for quite a while now, only beating Hawthorn, North Melbourne, and West Coast in the past 6 or 7 weeks. I think it's really hard to pick this one because both teams are really out of form.
Yeah.
The one thing is, I'm going to quickly change that because I didn't actually do that deliberately, so I did pick the right team. I had it on Richmond for some reason, but I realised I did tip the Saints. The only reason why I'm tipping the Saints here is because Richmond suck at Marvel.
Yeah.
They can't win at Marvel Stadium. And I think it's the last 9 or 10 times, ever since Dimmer Hardwick said that Richmond don't like playing there, they can't win a game there.
Yeah, they've lost.
I think 8 games. I think they lost 8 and 1 and got a draw.
Yeah, that's the record. So that leads me to the same reason I tipped the Saints.
Yeah.
And St Kilda do play well there. Like even though they lost last week to Carlton, they still played well for most of the game.
Yeah, they were up until 3/4 time, and then they just stopped at the last quarter. I think they need to kick a winning score though. They got to stop. They got to find a way to kick a winning score because I think that Richmond are a team that they can score against because Richmond aren't the best down in defence. So I think that's where they can get them done. But the thing is, St Kilda haven't been able to really kick a good score since at least halfway through the season. So massive game for the Saints. They need to win this one to keep their finals hopes alive and stop the free falling out of the top 8. I do think they win this one, but I do think it will be a close one. And finally, we get to another big game at the end of the round: Port Adelaide versus GWS at Adelaide Oval. This is a massive game. Even though the Giants lost last week, they were pretty good against the Swans. But I think the Swans just were able to hold them off in the last quarter when the Giants were coming. So credit to the Swans in that one. But Port Adelaide, they lose this. This is 5 losses in a row. And I can't remember the last time when a top 4 team has lost 5 games in a row and still hold their top 4 spot.
Yeah, it's crazy how good Port were and now how bad they're actually going.
I mean, I know that they've got a lot of injuries, Port Adelaide, but
I don't like to make that excuse.
Yeah.
And it's coming into the talks with some of the past Port players in the media that's the reason for it, and yeah, it's just I don't like it.
They've had a lot of injuries for a lot of the year though. It hasn't been like just the last 4 weeks when they've lost.
Yeah.
It's because they're not bringing as much of the pressure that they need to bring to win games.
Yeah.
I think that obviously, I think Vizentini, who's one of the big calls that they were saying is like they don't ever recognise Ruckman. This guy was one of their best players on the weekend.
Yeah.
So I know that Lysette obviously wasn't there and Sam Hayes wasn't playing either, which I don't know. Is he in the
Bryn Teagle? So
are they in the Sandful or are they just not playing? So
Teagle, I think was Lysette was injured. Teagle coming back from injury, and I don't know what Hayes is doing. I think he's still playing in the Sandful. So.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be surprised if he leaves the season then. But yeah, I think that's massive for Port Adelaide. I have tipped the Giants because the Giants actually haven't. I mean, they obviously won against the Crows only a month ago,
but
down at Adelaide Oval, and I just think they're playing better.
Yeah, they've played very well away this season. The Giants.
Yeah,
and that's why I've tipped them as well. I think that's one good reason that they played well away. Kingsley was pretty disappointed after that game against the Swans, and if Port don't get their defenders back, Toby Green's going to roam. Free.
I think Tom Jonas is a year too old now. I think that he would be a perfect match for him a few years ago, but now I think he's just too agile around the ground, Toby Green, and he'll run him ragged. And maybe what we've seen a lot this year is Toby Green maybe have a quiet first half, but if he's on someone like Tom Jonas for 2 quarters, I